Hello guys, here is JNM and this is the next Godot tutorial. In this one we will create a script for player movement using a kinematic body. So let's start again with a 2D project. Again I have my 3 folders: scripts, scenes and textures. In the textures folder I have 2 images, one for the background and one for the player, a pirate. I extracted these images from a 3D low poly scene made with an asset for Unreal Engine. The link can be found in the video's description. Okay, but as in the tutorial before, we have to add a root node before we can save our scene. So let's add a node 2D and call this root, and then I save the scene. Alright, and now I'm going to add a static body 2D object. As in the previous video, I don't want to add the background directly as a sprite, because I need a parent object that is a body 2D or an area 2D, something that a collision object can work with, because we're going to add collision objects later on that the player is able to walk on. So here's our background, very nice. I will set this to the point 0, 0 now, and then I will remove the centered property and it will be snapped correctly into the viewport. Okay, here we go. The next step will be to add colliders, and for the way for this landing stage I'm going to add a rectangular shape. So I use here the collision shape 2D, and I will set the shape to rectangle shape 2D. Then I change the size and the position. Yes, I think this will work. And now we have this barrel and the other objects here. And we need a second collider. For this one I will use a collision polygon 2D. I set the build mode to segments, and then I draw the shape around this barrel. Hold the Ctrl key down and add new points. Okay, and once it fits the shapes of these objects, we are ready to add a kinematic body 2D for the player. In the last tutorial I used a rigid body 2D for the player, but basically when using a kinematic body 2D you have more control over the player's movement, although you have to code, for example, things like gravity by yourself. So the kinematic body 2D is added, and now I drag the sprite into the scene and define it as a child of the kinematic body. I have to reposition the sprite to 0, 0, and I will also decrease the size, it's a little bit too big. And now we need a collision node for the player as well, and I will use a collision shape 2D. For the shape I will use a capsule shape 2D and resize it so that it fits the shape of the player. Okay, that's good enough, and now we can add the player script. So again, press this little icon here in the upper right hand corner. Then I select the scripts folder and create the script. So as you can see, the script extends kinematic body 2D because we added it to a node of type kinematic body 2D. And now we need a couple of variables. The first one is the velocity. This is a vector too, and we declare it here as a member variable and initialize it. The next thing we need is of course the gravity. The gravity will be a constant, so I call this here in the command members. This one we can delete, and I add a new command for constants. So I set the gravity to a value of, let's say, 400. The next thing we need is of course the speed of the player. I set it to 100 and I will export this. This means I will have access to this variable from the outside of the script, from my editor. The same I do for the smoothness of the movement, and I set it to 0.1. You will see how this factor works later on. Okay, and in the onReady, this is when the script is loaded, I get the sprite of the player and store it in the variable sprite. We will need this sprite to flip it when the player changes his direction. We want to flip the sprite horizontally. And like in the previous tutorial, I will register my setFixedProcess method and implement it. This method is called oncePerPhysic and we need it to handle the player's movement. So let's see. First we initialize the velocity in y direction with our gravity factor. This is what I meant when I said we have to care for the gravity by ourselves for the kinematics body. Okay, and now I will check the input buttons again, the left and right button of the keyboard. And when the left key is pressed, I will flip the sprite horizontally, and when the right one is pressed, I will remove the flip, set it to false to get my original sprite. And in this logic here, I will also set a direction value. I introduce a direction and set it to -1 when the left key is pressed and to 1 when the right key is pressed. Okay, now we have the direction and we have the player speed, and we will use this to set the velocity of the player for the x direction. So I multiply the player speed with the direction value, but I won't assign this directly. Here is where the smoothness comes into play. I will use a function that is called lerp, and this is a linear interpolation between the player speed and the current velocity. And this will lead to a smooth movement that can be parameterized by using the member smoothness. So we are almost done. We can use the calculated velocity now in the move method of the Kinematic Body 2D to actually move the player. But there's a little problem that we have to solve. When the player is standing on the ground, the motion vector isn't correct and we have to recalculate the next position. So we have to check if we are standing on the floor, if we are grounded, and this can be done by using the method isColliding. Well, to be honest, this should also be optimized, but I will show this in the next tutorial. We will go with that for now. And I will store the velocity and delta multiplication in a new variable so that we can reuse it in the following lines. What I have to do is to calculate the normal by using the getCollisionNormal, and I use this object and its method slide to calculate the correct motion vector. With these new values, we can call move now, and we are done. So let's test this. So have a look at this. The pirate is moving correctly, he moves smoothly, and the sprite flips when we change the direction. The collision works as well, also with this object here on the right. Very nice. Okay guys, the last thing that I want to show you is to set the member variables that we exported for the player speed and the smoothness. Let me set the player speed to 150 and the smoothness to, let's try 0.01. And now it feels a bit like he is sliding on ice. I guess not what you want, but I just want to show you how to parameterize these values. So there's a lot of stuff that we can do in the next tutorial, like animations or parallax backgrounds, jumping. We will see, just give me feedback and stay tuned. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel to be notified when new videos are online. And perhaps you consider supporting me on my Patreon. This would really help to keep the quantity and quality of my videos. Thanks a lot for watching guys, and see you soon.